The scream tore through the courtroom like a blade through silk, sharp enough to make even the bailiff flinch. "You don't get to talk to me like that." The words didn't just echo off the polished wood paneling and marble columns of Judge Judy's courtroom, they detonated, each syllable dripping with the kind of entitlement that makes your blood simmer. This wasn't a defendant pleading her case. This was a 19-year-old girl named Madison Pierce, standing in front of one of America's most feared judges, screaming like she owned the place. Her finger jabbed toward the bench, her designer nails catching the harsh courtroom lights, her face twisted into a mask of rage that would make a toddler in a toy store look reasonable by comparison. The gallery, packed with observers who'd seen 1,000 cases unfold in this very room, went dead silent. Phones rose like a forest of glass and metal, every single person recording, sensing that something extraordinary was about to detonate right in front of them. Before we dive into this incredible case, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing where my viewers are around the world. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss more unbelievable cases like this one. Now, sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. Madison Pierce wasn't just any defendant. She was a viral sensation before she ever stepped foot in this courtroom, a TikTok influencer with 2.3 million followers who'd built her entire brand on what she called standing up for herself. Her videos were a masterclass in manufactured outrage, screaming at retail workers over minor inconveniences, demanding discounts she hadn't earned, throwing drinks at baristas who got her order wrong, all captured in perfect 4K and edited with captions like, "I don't accept disrespect," and "Know your worth, Queens." Her comment sections were a war zone. Half her followers worshipped her as a hero of self-advocacy, the other half despised her as the walking embodiment of everything wrong with her generation. But none of that mattered to Madison. She'd monetized her tantrums into a six-figure income, landed sponsorship deals with questionable brands, and convinced herself that the rules binding ordinary people simply didn't apply to her. And now, standing in Judge Judy's courtroom, she was about to push that delusion to its absolute breaking point. But here's what made this moment so terrifying, so completely unprecedented: Madison wasn't losing. Not yet. In fact, as she stood there screaming, as her voice climbed higher and sharper, something impossible was happening. Judge Judy, the woman who'd spent 4 decades crushing egos and dismantling lies with the precision of a surgeon and the mercy of a sledgehammer, sat behind her bench in complete silence. Her face was unreadable, frozen in an expression that could have been carved from stone. Her hands rested flat on the mahogany surface in front of her, not reaching for her gavel, not moving to silence the tirade. For the first time in the living memory of everyone in that courtroom, Judge Judy Sheindlin, the judge who'd made grown men cry, who'd eviscerated lawyers with decades of experience, who'd once told a defendant, "I'm smarter than you," and proved it in under 30 seconds, looked like she didn't know what to do. The woman who'd never lost control of her courtroom was watching it slip through her fingers like water. Madison's lawyer, a sweating, pale man named Gerald Pritchard who looked like he'd aged 15 years in the past 15 minutes, sat slumped in his chair with his hand covering his face. He wasn't trying to stop her. He'd given up. Before the cameras started rolling, he'd pulled Madison aside and begged her in a whisper that was somehow both desperate and defeated, "Please, just let me handle this. Don't say anything unless the judge asks you directly. For the love of God, don't make this worse." Madison had looked at him like he'd suggested she cut off her own hand. "Worse? I'm not the one on trial here." That woman, she'd jerked her chin toward the defendant sitting across the aisle, a quiet, exhausted-looking woman in her 40s named Claire Morrison. "She's the criminal. And Judy's going to see that." Pritchard had closed his eyes and prayed to a God he wasn't sure existed anymore. The case itself should have been simple, almost boring by Judge Judy standards. Madison was suing Claire Morrison for $25,000, the maximum allowed in small claims court, claiming emotional distress, lost wages, and what her lawsuit described as permanent psychological damage. The story Madison told was compelling if you didn't look too closely. She'd been working as a promotional model at a pop-up event Claire had organized for her small marketing company. During the event, Madison claimed, Claire had yelled at her in front of customers, calling her lazy and unprofessional, humiliating her so severely that Madison had suffered a complete breakdown. She'd fled the event in tears, Madison said, and spent the next 3 months unable to work, seeing a therapist twice a week, battling anxiety and depression that made it impossible for her to create content or appear in public. She'd brought medical records, therapy bills, and even a letter from a doctor diagnosing her with acute stress disorder. On paper, it looked legitimate. On paper, Claire Morrison looked like a monster who'd destroyed a young woman's mental health over nothing. But Claire's version of events was different. Very different. According to Claire, Madison had shown up 2 hours late to the event, spent most of her time taking selfies instead of promoting the product, and when Claire had politely asked her to focus, Madison had exploded. Not just yelled, exploded. She'd called Claire every name you could think of and a few you couldn't say on television, thrown promotional materials across the room, and stormed out while live-streaming the whole thing to her followers with a caption that read, "Another Karen tries to control me." Claire had the footage. She had witnesses. She had timestamps. And most damning of all, she had Madison's own videos, posted to TikTok just days after the alleged breakdown, showing Madison at clubs, at beaches, at influencer parties, laughing and dancing and showing absolutely zero signs of the crippling anxiety and depression she was now claiming had destroyed her life. Judge Judy had reviewed all of this before the case began. Every document, every video, every piece of evidence from both sides. And anyone who knew Judy, really knew her, could see the signs. The way her jaw was set just a fraction tighter than usual. The way her eyes tracked Madison's every movement with the focus of a predator watching prey. The way her fingers drummed once, twice, 3 times on the bench before going completely still. Judy knew. She'd seen this game before, seen liars and con artists and entitled brats march into her courtroom thinking they could outsmart her. She'd destroyed every single one of them. But Madison Pierce wasn't like the others. Madison had something they didn't have, an audience. 2.3 million followers who would watch every second of this case, who would dissect every word, who would turn Judy into a villain if Madison played this right. And Madison knew it. You could see it in the way she angled her body slightly toward the gallery where phones were recording. In the way she made sure her tears, and yes, there were tears now, perfectly timed, caught the light. In the way every word she screamed was crafted for a clip that would go viral within hours. "I came here for justice," Madison shrieked, her voice cracking at exactly the right moment. "And all you've done is attack me. You haven't listened to anything I've said. You're just like everyone else, you see a young woman standing up for herself and you want to tear her down." The gallery shifted uncomfortably. A few people, mostly younger, probably Madison's fans who'd come to support her, nodded in agreement. One girl whispered loudly enough to be heard, "She's right though." And that's when the impossible became terrifying. Because Judge Judy, the woman who could silence a room with a single raised eyebrow, who'd once stopped a defendant mid-sentence by simply saying, in a tone that could freeze nitrogen, did nothing. She sat there, stone-faced and silent, while Madison Pierce seized control of the courtroom like a hostile takeover. The seconds stretched. 5. 10. 15. The air grew thick with tension, with the horrible anticipation of watching something that shouldn't be possible unfold right in front of you. Claire Morrison sat at the defendant's table, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone white, her eyes wide with something that looked like horror and disbelief mixed together. This was her life Madison was destroying with these lies, her reputation, her business that she'd spent 15 years building from nothing. And she was watching helplessly as a teenager with a phone and a persecution complex convinced a room full of people that up was down and black was white. Claire's lawyer, a sharp woman named Patricia Vega, leaned over and whispered something, but Claire just shook her head slowly. What could she say? What could anyone say when the entire world seemed to be tilting sideways? Then Madison went for the kill shot. She turned away from Judge Judy, actually turned her back on the judge, which would normally result in an immediate verbal execution, and addressed the gallery directly, her voice dropping from a scream to something softer, more vulnerable, more calculated. "I know what this looks like," she said, and now the tears were flowing freely, mascara tracking down her cheeks in lines that somehow made her look even more sympathetic. "I know you all think I'm just some spoiled girl who can't handle criticism. But you don't know what it's like to have your entire mental health destroyed by someone who has power over you. You don't know what it's like to be gaslit and abused and then told you're the problem." She let out a sob that sounded almost real. "I just wanted to work. I just wanted to do my job." And Madison pointed at Claire without even looking at her, she made it her mission to break me. And she did. She broke me. And now everyone's acting like I'm the bad guy for asking for justice. The room was breathing with Madison now. You could feel it. Even some of the people who'd come in skeptical were starting to waver, starting to think maybe, just maybe, this girl was telling the truth. Because she was good. Madison Pierce was very, very good at this. She'd spent years perfecting the art of the performance, of making people believe that her feelings were facts, that her version of reality was the only one that mattered. And in this moment, standing in Judge Judy's courtroom with cameras rolling and the internet watching, she was giving the performance of her life. Judge Judy's gavel sat on the bench within easy reach. She could have ended this with a single crack of wood on wood. She could have eviscerated Madison with a sentence, 2 sentences, torn apart this elaborate fiction and exposed it for exactly what it was. But she didn't move. Didn't speak. Just sat there with that unreadable expression while Madison Pierce did what no defendant had ever successfully done in her courtroom, took control. And that's when you realized something truly terrifying. Judge Judy wasn't silent because she didn't know what to do. She was silent because she was letting Madison hang herself. Because somewhere in the past 60 seconds, while Madison had been screaming and performing and playing to the cameras, Judy had made a calculation. A choice. She'd decided that destroying Madison quickly would be too merciful. Too easy. Instead, she was going to let Madison think she'd won. Let her get comfortable. Let her believe that her tears and her followers and her carefully crafted victim narrative had actually worked. And then Judy was going to take everything. Not just the case. Everything. Because Judge Judy Sheindlin didn't just win cases, she taught lessons. And Madison Pierce, with her 2.3 million followers and her designer outfits and her absolute certainty that the rules didn't apply to her, was about to learn the most expensive lesson of her life. The question wasn't whether Madison would lose. The question was how much she would lose. And the answer, which nobody in that courtroom knew yet, which Madison herself couldn't even imagine in her worst nightmares, was simple and absolute: everything. Judge Judy's silence stretched for another 3 seconds that felt like 3 hours. Then, slowly, deliberately, she reached for the single manila folder that had been sitting in front of her since the case began. The folder was thin, almost innocent-looking, the kind you'd use for routine paperwork or old receipts. But the way Judy's fingers rested on it, the way she didn't open it immediately, told everyone in that courtroom something critical: whatever was inside that folder was a weapon. Madison, still riding the high of her performance, still convinced she'd seized control, wiped her tears with the back of her hand and sniffled loudly. "I just want what's fair," she said, her voice small and wounded. "That's all I've ever wanted." Judy opened the folder. No dramatic flourish, no announcement, just a quiet flip of the cover that somehow felt louder than Madison's screaming had been. She pulled out a single sheet of paper, held it up to the light as if examining it for the first time, though everyone knew she'd already memorized every word. "Madison," Judy said, and her voice was so calm it was almost gentle. "Almost. I want you to tell me again, very clearly, exactly what happened at Claire's event. Take your time. Be specific." Madison blinked, confusion flickering across her face. This wasn't how judges talked to her when they were losing control. This was something else. Something that made the back of her neck prickle with the first whisper of real fear. But she'd committed to the performance, and backing down now would destroy everything. So Madison took a breath, steadied herself, and launched back into her story. I showed up on time, ready to work. I was professional, I was focused, I was doing exactly what she hired me to do. And then Claire just started screaming at me in front of everyone, calling me names, telling me I was worthless, that I'd never succeed, that. Stop. Judy's voice cut through Madison's words like a guillotine blade. Not loud. Not harsh. Just absolute. Madison's mouth hung open mid-sentence. You showed up on time? Judy asked. Yes, Madison said, nodding vigorously. 2 o'clock, exactly when she told me to. Judy nodded slowly, then turned to her clerk. Please enter Exhibit A into the record. The clerk, a woman who'd worked with Judy long enough to know when something devastating was about to happen, took the paper from Judy's hand and stamped it with practiced efficiency. Judy held up the document so the cameras could see it clearly. This is the security footage timestamp from the building where Claire's event took place. It shows you arriving at 4:17 p.m. The event started at 2 p.m. You weren't 2 hours late, Madison. You were 2 hours and 17 minutes late. The courtroom inhaled collectively. Madison's face went through a fascinating series of expressions, confusion, then recognition, then panic, then a desperate scramble back to indignation. The timestamp must be wrong. Those cameras are never accurate, everyone knows that. Judy held up her hand. Madison stopped talking immediately, some primal instinct finally recognizing the danger she was in. The timestamp, Judy said, her voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty, matches the timestamp on your own Instagram story that you posted from your car, which shows you leaving your apartment at 3:45. With the caption, Judy adjusted her glasses and read from another paper, running late, but these brands need to learn to wait for quality. Madison's lawyer, Gerald, made a sound like a man watching his house burn down. In the gallery, Madison's supporters shifted uncomfortably. One of them lowered her phone. Judy wasn't finished. She pulled out another document, this one thicker. You claim Claire screamed at you, called you worthless, told you you'd never succeed. Claire, did you say any of those things? Claire Morrison, who'd been silent and terrified up to this point, found her voice. It was shaky but clear. No, Your Honor. I asked her, politely, if she could please stop taking selfies and focus on the customers. That's all I said. Judy turned back to Madison. Do you deny taking selfies during work hours? Madison's jaw tightened. I was documenting the event for my social media. That's part of what influencers do, we promote through our platforms. She should have been grateful. Grateful, Judy repeated, and the way she said the word made it sound like a disease. Let me show you what else you were doing. She pulled out a series of printed screenshots, spreading them across the bench like dealing cards. These are your TikTok videos from the 3 months following this alleged breakdown. The 3 months when you claim you were so traumatized, so psychologically damaged, that you couldn't work or appear in public. She picked up the first screenshot. March 15th, 5 days after the incident. You're at a club in Miami. The caption says, living my best life, haters can stay mad. She picked up another. March 22nd. You're parasailing in Cancun. April 3rd, you're at Coachella. April 18th, you're hosting a meet and greet with fans in Los Angeles. Judy looked up from the photos, her eyes locking onto Madison like a missile finding its target. You know what I don't see in any of these videos, Madison? I don't see someone suffering from acute stress disorder. I don't see depression or anxiety or trauma. I see someone having the time of her life while lying about being destroyed. The courtroom erupted. Not in gasps this time, but in a low, angry murmur. Madison's supporters were silent now, their phones lowered, their faces showing the dawning realization that they'd been conned. Claire Morrison's hands came up to cover her mouth, tears starting to flow, real tears, not performed ones. Her lawyer touched her shoulder gently. Madison stood frozen, her mind racing for an explanation, an excuse, anything that could pull her back from the edge of the cliff she suddenly realized she was standing on. Those videos, I was trying to stay positive, trying to push through. You were scamming, Judy said flatly. You saw an opportunity to get $25,000 from a woman whose only crime was asking you to do your job. So you manufactured a lawsuit, fabricated trauma, and came into my courtroom thinking your followers and your tears would be enough to sell the lie. Judy leaned forward slightly, and her voice dropped to something that was somehow more terrifying than any scream could ever be. Here's what you forgot, young lady. I've been doing this for 40 years. I've seen liars who were smarter than you, more convincing than you, better prepared than you. And I destroyed every single one of them. Did you really think you'd be different? Madison's mouth opened, but no sound came out. For the first time since she'd entered the courtroom, she had absolutely nothing to say. And in that silence, Judge Judy smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It wasn't friendly. It was the smile of someone who just sprung a trap and was about to watch it snap shut. The silence lasted exactly 4 seconds before Madison's carefully constructed facade shattered completely. This is bullshit, she screamed, and this time there was no performance in it, no calculated vulnerability. This was pure, unfiltered panic dressed up as rage. You're twisting everything. You're making me look like some kind of criminal when I'm the victim here. Her voice climbed higher with each word, cracking at the edges, spit flying from her mouth as she gesticulated wildly. Judge Judy didn't move, didn't blink, just watched Madison's meltdown with the detached interest of a scientist observing a predictable chemical reaction. I have rights. Madison shrieked, her designer handbag sliding off her shoulder and hitting the floor with an expensive thud that nobody noticed. You can't do this to me. I came here for justice and you're attacking me because you're jealous that I have a platform and you're just some old. The gavel came down. Once. The crack of wood on wood was so sharp, so sudden, that Madison actually jumped, her sentence dying mid-word. The courtroom, which had been buzzing with shocked murmurs, went completely silent. Judge Judy set the gavel down with deliberate precision, her eyes never leaving Madison's face. Sit down, she said quietly. Madison didn't move, frozen in her half-crouched position, breathing hard. I said sit down, or I will have the bailiff physically place you in that chair. The bailiff, a muscular man who'd been standing near the back wall, took 2 steps forward. Madison sat. Her legs seemed to give out rather than obey, dropping her into the chair with an ungraceful thump. Judy folded her hands on the bench, the picture of controlled fury. You want to talk about rights? Let's discuss rights. You have the right to remain silent, and given what's about to happen, I'd strongly suggest you exercise it. You have the right to an attorney, though I notice yours is currently contemplating every life choice that led him to this moment. Gerald Pritchard had indeed gone pale, his briefcase already half-packed as if planning his escape. What you don't have, Judy continued, is the right to commit perjury in my courtroom. The word hung in the air like a grenade. Perjury. Madison's eyes went wide. I'm not. You lied under oath, Judy said flatly. You fabricated medical records, manufactured evidence of psychological trauma, and attempted to defraud Ms. Morrison of $25,000. That's not a civil matter anymore, young lady. That's criminal. She turned to the court clerk. Please prepare a full transcript of these proceedings for the district attorney's office. I want it delivered before end of business today. The clerk nodded, already typing. Madison made a sound like a wounded animal. You can't, there's no way, I have a doctor's note. Judy picked up another document from her folder. You mean this doctor's note? From Dr. Richard Chen. Madison nodded desperately, grasping at the lifeline. Dr. Chen's medical license was suspended 8 months ago for fraudulent diagnoses. He's currently under federal investigation for running a prescription pill mill. I called his office yesterday. Want to guess who answered? Madison's face had gone from flushed red to chalk white. A DEA agent. The courtroom exploded. Not with murmurs this time but with audible gasps, shocked exclamations, the sound of people turning to their neighbors to confirm they'd heard correctly. Claire Morrison's lawyer shot to her feet. "Your Honor, in light of this evidence, my client would like to file a countersuit for defamation, fraud, legal fees, and emotional distress." Judy nodded. "Granted. We'll address that momentarily." She turned back to Madison, who looked like she might vomit. "Bailiff, please escort Ms. Pierce into custody pending charges." The bailiff's hand closed around Madison's upper arm with professional firmness. She tried to jerk away, but his grip was iron. "Don't touch me. You can't, I'm calling my dad. He'll sue all of you." Her voice had devolved into something between a shriek and a sob, all traces of her polished influencer persona stripped away to reveal the terrified teenager underneath. The bailiff produced handcuffs from his belt with practiced ease. The metallic click as they locked around Madison's wrists was the only sound in the courtroom besides her hyperventilating gasps. Judge Judy's voice cut through Madison's panic. "Your father can visit you at the county jail. Arraignment will be Monday morning. Until then, you'll have plenty of time to think about the consequences of lying to a judge." Madison twisted in the bailiff's grasp, mascara-stained tears streaming down her face. "This isn't fair. I'm 19. I made a mistake." "You made a choice," Judy corrected coldly. "Multiple choices. You chose to lie. You chose to forge documents. You chose to attempt fraud. And you chose to come into my courtroom and double down on every single lie when you had multiple opportunities to tell the truth." The bailiff began guiding Madison toward the side door. She dug her heels into the carpet, looking back at the gallery where her phone-wielding supporters sat in stunned silence. "You're all recording this, right? You see what she's doing to me? This is abuse of power. This is justice," Judy said simply. The door closed behind Madison, cutting off her protests mid-sentence. The courtroom remained silent for a long moment, everyone processing what they'd just witnessed. Then Judge Judy turned to Claire Morrison, her expression softening almost imperceptibly. "Ms. Morrison, I apologize that you had to endure this circus." Claire Morrison wiped her eyes with shaking hands, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you, Your Honor. I couldn't believe someone would lie like that. My business, my reputation, everything I've built, she almost destroyed it all." Judge Judy nodded gravely. "That's exactly what she intended to do. And that's why we're going to make sure she never gets the opportunity to do it to anyone else." The judge turned to her clerk. "Let the record show that the plaintiff's case is dismissed with prejudice. Furthermore, I'm awarding the defendant, Claire Morrison, the full $25,000 she was falsely sued for, plus an additional $15,000 in punitive damages and legal fees. Total judgment, $40,000, to be paid by Madison Pierce." Gerald Pritchard, who'd been sitting in stunned silence, finally found his voice. "Your Honor, my client doesn't have $40,000. Judy's eyebrow arched. "Then she'll get a payment plan. A long one. She'll be reminded of this decision every single month for years." She wasn't finished. "Additionally, I'm ordering a full investigation into Ms. Pierce's social media activities and previous legal settlements." Ms. Morrison's attorney mentioned in her brief that this isn't the first time Ms. Pierce has filed suspicious claims. Patricia Vega, Claire's lawyer, stood immediately. "That's correct, Your Honor. We've identified at least 2 other individuals who settled small claims cases with Ms. Pierce in the past 18 months. Both cases involved similar allegations of emotional distress, both settled quietly for undisclosed amounts." The courtroom buzzed with fresh shock. Judge Judy's jaw tightened. "Get me their names and contact information. If there's a pattern of fraud here, the district attorney needs to know about it. This stops today." She turned to address the gallery directly, something she rarely did. Let me be very clear for everyone watching, everyone recording, everyone who thinks they can game the legal system the way Ms. Pierce tried to do. The courtroom is not your personal stage. Justice is not a game. And when you lie under oath, when you attempt to destroy innocent people's lives for financial gain, there are consequences. Real consequences. Outside the courthouse, the scene was already chaos. News vans lined the street, their satellite dishes raised like mechanical flowers seeking sunlight. Madison's arrest had leaked within minutes, someone in the gallery had posted it to Twitter, and the internet had exploded. #Madison Pierce was trending worldwide within 20 minutes. But this time, the comments weren't divided. This time, there was no debate. The footage of Madison Pierce being led out of Judge Judy's courtroom in handcuffs became the most watched courtroom clip in internet history, surpassing 40 million views in the first 72 hours alone. But something remarkable happened in those comment sections, in those sharing threads, in those heated discussions across every social media platform. People weren't just entertained. They were learning. The viral moment had sparked a genuine conversation about accountability, about the difference between standing up for yourself and weaponizing victimhood, about the devastating real-world consequences when lies are treated as truth. And therein lay the profound lesson woven through this entire saga. Madison Pierce had built an empire on a simple formula: scream loud enough, cry convincingly enough, and people will believe you're the victim regardless of the facts. She'd monetized outrage, turned manipulation into a business model, and convinced millions of followers that rules were just suggestions for people without enough confidence to break them. For years, it had worked. She'd gotten refunds she didn't deserve, settlements from people too exhausted to fight, sponsorships from brands desperate for her audience. She'd learned that in the court of public opinion, feelings mattered more than facts, and the person who performed victimhood most convincingly usually won. But then she walked into a real courtroom. A place where evidence actually mattered, where timestamps couldn't be edited, where a judge who'd spent 40 years seeing through lies took exactly 12 minutes to dismantle an empire built on manipulation. Madison lost everything not because Judge Judy was cruel, but because justice, real justice, doesn't care about your follower count. It doesn't care how convincingly you cry or how many people believe your version of events. It cares about one thing: the truth. And when you build your entire life on lies, when you hurt innocent people for personal gain, when you look a judge in the eye and double down on fraud, the truth doesn't just defeat you. It obliterates you. 3 weeks after her arrest, Madison Pierce's social media accounts went dark. Not deleted, seized as evidence in her criminal case. Her followers, once numbering in the millions, had already abandoned her in droves. The brands that had sponsored her scrambled to distance themselves, issuing statements about not aligning with our values. The 2 previous victims Judge Judy had mentioned came forward publicly, filing their own criminal complaints. The district attorney announced a full investigation into what they were now calling a pattern of systemic fraud. Madison's father, the lawyer she'd bragged about, released a terse statement saying he would not be representing his daughter and that the family had no comment at this time. Claire Morrison, meanwhile, saw her business boom. The publicity had been traumatic, but the vindication was complete. Orders flooded in from people who wanted to support the woman who'd stood up to a con artist. She hired 2 new employees within a month. When a local news station asked her how she felt about Madison's downfall, Claire's answer was simple: I feel relieved. Not for me, for the next person she would have targeted if someone hadn't stopped her. That's the thing about bullies, about frauds, about people who build their success on hurting others. They don't stop until someone makes them stop. Madison Pierce thought she was untouchable because she'd gotten away with it before, because her youth and her tears and her army of followers had always been enough to avoid real consequences. She thought Judge Judy's courtroom would be just another stage for her performance, another opportunity to manipulate the narrative and walk away richer. She was wrong. Catastrophically, life-alteringly wrong. And the beautiful, terrible poetry of it all is this: Madison destroyed herself. Every lie she told, Every piece of fake evidence she presented, every tantrum she threw, it was all recorded, time-stamped, and used against her. She documented her own downfall, posted it for the world to see, and then acted shocked when the world held her accountable. So here's what this story really teaches us. Truth is patient. Justice might be slow, but it's thorough. You can lie to your followers, you can lie to brands, you can even lie to yourself. But when you lie under oath, when you attempt to destroy innocent lives for money, when you look directly into the camera and choose fraud over honesty, eventually, inevitably, you will face someone who won't be manipulated. Someone who's seen your game before. Someone who has the evidence, the authority, and the absolute refusal to let you get away with it. Madison Pierce learned that lesson at 19 years old. She'll spend the next several years paying for it, literally and figuratively. But maybe, just maybe, her spectacular downfall will save the next Claire Morrison from being targeted. Maybe the next influencer considering a fraudulent lawsuit will remember those handcuffs clicking shut and think twice. Maybe someone watching will realize that real strength isn't about screaming the loudest or performing victimhood most convincingly. Real strength is telling the truth, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Because at the end of the day, Judge Judy didn't destroy Madison Pierce. Madison destroyed herself. Judy just made sure everyone was watching when it happened. And that 30 seconds of screaming? It cost Madison everything, her freedom, her money, her reputation, her future. All because she forgot one simple truth that every adult should know: actions have consequences. Not sometimes. Not maybe. Always. If this story showed you that truth always wins in the end, then do me a favor right now, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. We bring you real courtroom justice that proves no one is above the law, no matter how many followers they have. Share this video with someone who needs to see that accountability still exists in this world. And drop a comment below: do you think Madison got what she deserved, or should the punishment have been even harsher? Your voice matters in this conversation. Thanks for watching until the very end, and remember, the courtroom doesn't care about your performance. It cares about your proof. See you in the next one.